Red Ray Gun Limited presents
The Benji and Nick Show.
Hello.
Ooh, this is nice, isn't it? You know,
Good morning.
we come to this place every week, and it's just like it's like putting on an old shoe, isn't it? You know what you're gonna get. It's lovely. I suppose we better do the thing that we always do. Do you want to start?
A good morning.
You did. I heard you do a good morning. Shall I say a good afternoon?
Good evening.
Good day.
Goodness.
Loch Ness.
You got Loch Ness again. I can never work out what's coming. This is the Benji and Nick Show. I'm not Benji.
And I'm certainly not Nick, but we are Benji and Nick.
Yeah, it's true. And we discuss cult television.
We certainly do.
Every week, we spontaneously decide on something we're going to talk about the following week. And last week, we spontaneously decided the Flipside of Dominick Hyde, a BBC play for today. It also had a sequel called Another Flip. Oh, yeah. Peter Firth, starring as a time traveller from the future. Ends up in the 1980s. Got a lot to say about that. We'll be talking about that. We also talk about what we've been generally looking at this week. And we're going to have a clip from my mum talking about her mum's experiences in the First World War.
Oh, wow.
And we'll be talking about your emails as well, which you should send to podcast@nicholasbriggs.com. There's also a brand new competition.
Da, da, da.
That's Benji's competition.
That was what you get. You just get me going. Da, da.
Benji, what have you been watching this week?
What have I been watching this week? I've been delving into a bit of history, actually, because I'm a geek. I've not gone into too much cult television this week, but purely just because my head has just been in work and music, really. But I've been watching a lot of Terry Jones' Medieval Lives, which I've not seen for a while. But it's such a fun history program. I absolutely used to love it. Really clever. It just talks about everyday life in medieval times and the different roles that people played and stuff, with the classic Terry Jones humour in there. It's a bit like the Holy Grail, but kind of educational. But I love stuff like that. I was really into it. I got a lot of time for that. So it's not cult television really, but I'd spent a day in the 1970s if that's some kind of consolation. Recording with the Zigsters, and
I saw the
really
tweets of the VU meters and the organ as well, where you did a fake car advert.
So good.
You couldn't send me the recording of that fake car advert, could you?
I certainly can send you the recording of that one. Yeah, we got.
Should we hear that now? Then I'll edit it in.
Let's do it.
Would you like a car that drives reliably? A car that you can take all over the world? The Bowler Hive Continental is the car for you. With a rear hatchback, seats that fold down, and exhausts which don't make a loud noise, this car is bound to be perfect. So sign up to Bowler Hive now for a chance to win this brand new car.
So fun.
Marvellous. And you were recording on really big chunky tape as well, weren't you?
We were, yes. We've got the huge 16-track tape machine. We got the Hammond organ there, which I think we only put in this particular song. We only put in for a verse, not even a chorus, just a verse. Just a little touch of it was enough. But the funniest thing that we did is that because it's the 70s, and especially this is real glam sort of album that we're working on. There's a lot of clapping involved, and so they traditionally always say that you don't clap like that. You clap slapping your knees, and you slap your knees and your thighs, because that creates a more meaty slap sound. Anyway, the song's about
meaty slaps.
Meaty slap. But the song is 3.5 minutes long.
Oh,
so
a bit sore.
God, were we? God, when I got home, right, I looked at my thighs, and I could see visible handprints from where I'd been when doing that. Absolutely unbelievable. So it's crazy. So although I haven't been watching,
this is really hurting me now.
Do that for 3 minutes. There are two of us as well, so it sounded really big. We were quite surprised by how massive it sounded. So yeah. So whilst I've not really been delving into so much cult telly this week, I've got a few things I'd like to. I've got a plane journey on Friday, so I'm going to load my iPad with a few bits and bobs to amuse myself. But I did spend a day being in a rather cult environment, so to speak, a rather quintessential 70s environment. And how about yourself, Nick? What have you been watching this week?
Well, I've been pretty busy actually directing some Third Doctor adventures with Katie Manning and Tim Treloar and other things. Other things, they're things, obviously not actors. And it's all been, very, very, very hard work. Lots of fun, but hard work. So difficult to watch anything. I have been trying to catch up with the Owl service because I promised I'd watch it all. And I've watched a few more episodes and it continues to be weird and entertaining and essential viewing. The Owl service gets touched on in our emails, I think. Have I seen anything else? Well, obviously, I've watched the flip side of Dominick Hyde. I haven't watched much else, actually. Had interesting conversations about press on Facebook.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, someone who is a journalist and works in newspapers saying, it's utter tosh, basically. It's all made up nonsense, doesn't happen like that. I don't doubt it for a moment. This is what dramas often do. Still, it doesn't diminish my enjoyment of it. Have I seen any? I don't think I've seen anything else. I've tried to watch a bit more Public Eye, but haven't had time to finish the episode I got recorded here, which is a shame. Enjoying it though, loving it. Yeah, that's it really.
Busy week, clearly. We've both been a bit...
Yeah,
you got more in than me, though.
That's true. I need a bit of telly to wind down in the evenings. Should we go straight to the emails?
I think we should. Why not? Love an email.
Do you want to do the first one?
Certainly, I'd love to. So the first one's from Richard James, who we know very well, who also does the podcast with Jamie Anderson. If it is the same Richard, I assume it's the same Richard James. It could be a completely different Richard James. So from one podcast to another. This was sent on Thursday, October the 11th.
I wanted to put this one in the last podcast, but I accidentally deleted it, so I had to get him to send it again.
So
I don't know how I did that. I think it was something stupid I did on my phone.
Always the way. We've all done it. So we got this one here. It says the subject is podcast thoughts. Hi chaps, as I have no doubt you'll read out the time of this email on your podcast, I should explain that I've just spent an evening in the pub with the Awful Auntie cast after opening in how do you even say that? Llandudno, wow. Yeah. For the week. Cool, you sound like you could be in the Owl service. I can't sleep and thought now would be the perfect time to get in touch. I'm really enjoying the podcast and often listen as I shave and shower in readiness for our first show each week. So much so that I reckon that when I finish this tour, I'll still have some sort of Pavlovian response whenever I hear your voices and I feel the sudden need to jump into the shower and check my chin for signs of 5 o'clock shadow. I'm glad we're helping you out anyway. Anyway, my question is this. If the Benji and Nick show were to exist 30 years hence, which of today's TV shows do you think you'd be talking about? Is there still such a thing as cult TV? Oh, it's a good question, isn't it? Should we answer this one now and then move on to the next one?
In the future, well, it's almost impossible to tell, Richard, is really the boring reply, isn't it? I mean, obviously, I'd be talking about press.
Yeah, probably just talk about what we're watching at the moment, to be honest.
Or maybe, would we be talking about Dr. Foster? Would I have reassessed Dr. Foster, which is possibly the single most annoying television drama I've ever seen, I think.
Doc Martin. We'll just go mad for Doc Martin.
Doc Martin. You see, I would love to watch Doc Martin, but my wife won't let me watch it.
Oh, no. Doesn't she like Martin Clunes?
She thinks... Oh, she does, actually. She very much likes Martin Clunes. I think sympathises with a lot of his views on conservation and what have you. She's got a thing against soaps, and if she watches something and it feels like a soap opera, she just goes, this is just a soap opera, it's just rubbish. And she felt that Doc Martin, the story of a rural GP...
Is he Cornish, isn't he?
It is Cornwall, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's Cornwall.
He's not Cornish.
He's not Cornish, no.
But he's a GP, a doctor, and he's terrified of blood, and... She just said it's basically EastEnders but with a few laughs in it, which I think is very harsh, and because I find EastEnders very annoying. And she did say to me, I must have said this before, surely, she saw me, I was watching EastEnders idly, just like something on in the background, occasionally paying attention to it. About a week before we got married, she said, are you watching that? And I went, yeah, I suppose I am a bit. She said, Well, there won't be a wedding if you carry on doing that.
I tell you what, as a soap person, I can't stand EastEnders because I find it really depressing.
I think it's good. I think it's good.
It's good. It is good.
It is something I don't like. Like football, if there's a great match football, I'm sure it is great, but I don't like football. But I can, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying, it's terrible, it should never exist. I'm just saying it's just not my kind of thing.
I'll tell you something actually. I think might be regarded as cult TV in the future would be something like Keeping Faith, because that's the type of thing that I could see that sort of living on as a thing people say, a bit like...
That's the thing with Eve Miles, the Welsh sort of mystery murder thriller thing.
It's really good and feels really fresh. I mean, I tell you one thing which is sort of cult already is that like Life on Mars, which is only about 10 years old, but that feels like real cult telly already. It already feels like a bit. I suppose it's because it's got that nostalgic sort of setting, but I would regard that heavily as cult telly.
I don't remember how it ended. I really got into it. I really loved that, and I think I remember finding the ending really annoying.
The ending was a bit. It depends if you're talking Life on Mars or whatchamacallit, the sequel, Ashes to Ashes.
Yes, I gave up on that quite quickly.
The first series of Ashes wasn't too great, but then it really picked up towards the end. I was quite surprised. I had never warmed. I mean, I'm a 70s lad, so for me, the 70s setting was my favourite thing. Yeah. I was happy with the ending of Life on Mars, though. I was really happy with that, but only because I think I would have done exactly the same, which is just gone back and stayed there.
Is that what happens?
Yeah, he just goes back and says that's it.
So he dies, basically.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Well, it's a purgatory. It's meant to be like a sort of place like a limbo sort of place.
70s is the 70s are purgatory.
But I think interesting though, Richard, about that is there still such a thing as cult TV? So
does he mean
will there be? Yeah, will there be? Yeah. I suppose there would be. I suppose it's whether or not cult TV is what we consider cult television now, or whether things from now are dissolved into what we call cult television. Or whether it has a whole new genre in itself for this sort of modern drama. It's an interesting one.
It is interesting. I just wanted to go back to Life on Mars. I thought Liz White, who was in it, was really good. And I was so thrilled that I got to work with her in the Brink of Death, which was the final Colin Baker episode that I wrote for the box set The Last Adventure.
She's great. Oh yeah, she's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
There's something proper 70s about her. The brilliant thing about Liz is that she calls everyone Chucky.
Chucky?
All right, Chucky, Mitchell, and all that kind of thing.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. As it should be. It should be.
I think she's an amazing actor. I'd love to work with her again, actually.
But
I'm not quite sure why she isn't a really huge star, because she's quite amazing.
She did the great job, I think, of, like you said, like channeling that 70s energy in there, and channeling a bit of that 70s, the way the sort of characters were in 70s dramas, but also she added that realism of what we now, reality essentially in there. She kind of channeled it all wonderfully, really. But what a series! That's one we will have to check that out at some point.
Life on Mars, yeah.
If it can be regarded as cult television.
Well, I think that's up to us to decide, Benji.
Our choice. So carrying on with the email here, he says, secondly, if you ever again, after reviewing the Tomorrow People, dive into the world of children's TV, might I recommend Sky, from the pens of Bob Baker and Dave Martin, two names associated with many a cult TV series. Here's a link to the opening titles, which might go some way to explaining why it scared the bejesus out of me as a kid. I'd have to watch this again. I have come across it. I've never sat and watched Sky properly, but
it's worth it.
I have seen the title singers before in my cruises through.
Lots of violin stuff. I loved Sky. Watched it the 2 times it was shown on the telly, and I have actually got the DVD as well.
Oh, that classic, that glass shattered font.
Yeah. HTV,
Oh, anything by HTV is a sort of symbol of it's going to be good, no matter what.
Is Patrick John Gould again as well?
Oh, I like it. I like it a lot.
The HTV thing, I wanted to do the theme tune of Arthur of the Britons.
Lots of riding around on horses, getting muddy.
Love it. Lots of love. And he's doing double L's with his lots of love from London. Richard.
That's for Richard, yeah. P.S. Next time you speak to that Jamie Anderson, ask him for an update on Richard the Sheep. Oh, yes, definitely.
Well, when we talk to Jamie shortly, we will. Next email.
Yeah, thanks for that one, Richard. Awesome to hear from you.
Thanks. He's such a lovely guy, Richard. A very good actor. Why don't I employ him more? That's what we ask. Because he's on a never-ending tour, and then he's going into the West End. Kevin Parker, who we know from Chicago TARDIS, don't we?
We certainly do.
He wrote to the podcast on the 16th of October at 07:02 in the morning, but whether that, I don't know what the time was in the Chicago sort of area. I don't know whether he comes from Chicago or somewhere further away and travels. I can't remember where he comes from. Never mind. Sorry, Kevin. Hi, Benji and Nick. I have 2 suggestions for cult TV shows to cover. One pretty obvious one and one totally out of left field. The obvious one is Sandbaggers. Yeah. A superb late 70s TV series that had its own cult following in the US for a while. We love this. Have you seen the Sandbaggers?
I've seen... just sounds like my catch. I've seen the title sequence because you sent it to me a while back and you just said that's brilliant, you'll love it.
Lovely music. Ding, 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 ding. Complete with fanzines. It's starring Roy Marsden, lovely Roy Marsden, who I've worked with a couple of times, lovely bloke, as the director of operations for a thinly disguised MI6. It followed the gritty adventures of him and his team in a Cold War setting. Other actors include Ray Lonan, Frontier in Space. So I really thought he's fantastic, Ray Lonan, and was so disappointed in a very selfish way that he died not that long ago, because I was desperate to work with him. I had him sort of lined up. I was thinking, must work with Ray Lonan. Michael Cashman was in Time Flight, and Jerome Willis. It ends on a cliffhanger because the showrunner, Ian McIntosh, went missing in a private plane, and the producers didn't think anyone could go on writing the way he did. This outcome has provoked speculation that he was offed because he was revealing too many of MI6's secrets, or was in fact on a mission for MI6 at the time.
Whoa.
Wow, isn't that? We've got to do the Sandbaggers at some point. When I last watched it, I borrowed the DVDs off my mother-in-law. So if we watched it again, I'd have to go to Exeter to get them. The left field one is a 1990s Canadian series called Reboot.
Loved it.
This is a totally... Oh, you've seen it? I've not seen it.
That was my childhood ITV. Absolutely loved it.
This is a totally bonkers children's series whose characters live inside a computer called Mainframe. If they're not battling computer viruses aptly named Megabyte, voiced by the brilliant Tony J, or Hexadecimal, yes, computer puns abound, they're having to deal with users who impose games on them at unfortunate moments that the characters have to drop what they're doing and play in, and in fact win lest they suffer most dire consequences. It's done entirely in CGI, early 1990s CGI. Somehow I think Benji will particularly enjoy this series. Well, he does. It's available on DVD, at least in North America.
See, I've not seen that in absolutely years, but I used to love it, and I still remember the opening line of all the series. You had the sweeping of this sort of rubbish CGI city, and it always started with him saying, "We come from the net. Our place, the mainframe." And I remember it was like, really, they had these cool little flying skateboards. Basically, Back to the Future, a lot of Back to the Future stuff, but yeah, God, what fun! What fun that was.
The premiere episode is as good as any to get a feel for the series. The second one I recommend, Talent Night, is very different, but is probably the most fun episode of the first season. The premise is that they're trying to organise a variety show to celebrate the birthday of one of the characters, and in the process they send up everything from the Village People to William Shatner to Michael Jackson, with a nod to Spinal Tap at one point. Anyhow, I'm enjoying both of your podcasts. I'm referring to the Big Finish podcast as well. And I hope you enjoy my suggestions. Kevin, thank you. Kevin, here's another one here.
Let's have a look. Let's dive in. From Rick Davey, The Unmutual.
No, it's all friends, this, isn't it? Emails from friends. Yes.
Sounds like a really rubbish...
Is there one from my mum here somewhere?
Sounds like a sort of 90s drama series, doesn't it? Next up, emails from my friends. A brand new one, he's a computer salesman who's starting a dating business. Hi, Benji and Nick. Great work, as always, with the recent podcasts. To quote the Colonel from the Prisoner episode, The Chimes of Big Ben, the night is young and there are many questions, or rather, answers. I'm pleased that Nick is giving the Owl service a second chance. It's so unusual and daringly different that it really does deserve our respect, even if it didn't turn out 100% perfectly. As Nick said, there's nothing like the Owl service. The locations are great, it's well directed, the acting is adequate, the atmosphere and tension really does build as the episodes continue. So Nick, do let us all know what you think of the rest of it.
I will. It's interesting that the notes in the DVD say that one of the characters is sort of played incorrectly.
Oh, really?
It's not quite right. He comes out as a spoilt brat when he was supposed to be a sort of more complicated character. But I wasn't worrying about that. I am now, of course.
Says, if either of you want to visit the Stone of... I can't even say... The Stone of Gron...
I can't remember how they pronounce it. Gronwy?
Gronwyn?
Gronw. That's how it's spelled.
Basically, that big bloody stone stuck in the ground with the hole in it.
With the hole in it.
With the hole in it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It is, as Benji mentioned, still in the same field with the same view of the cops through the hole. Then just let me know. It's about 25 minutes from where I live. So next time you're passing, right, well, Rick, we need to see a picture of you now with your head poked through the hole, like reenacting that scene. I think
you know he'll do that now, don't you? You absolutely know that he will.
To answer your Champions music question, it was indeed Robert Farnon who composed the first attempt at a theme tune for The Prisoner. He was asked by McGowan to compose something like The Big Country. However, McGowan amusingly and rightly felt it was too similar to The Big Country and rejected it. Yes, it was. Thus leaving it free to be used in other ITC productions, which is how it ended up in The Champions. This week's choice, The Flipside of Dominick Hyde, is a delightful, if a little dated play, and I predict a solid 4 exclamation marks from Benji. If I ever write any more books, I'm going to get Benji to review them as a 2 or 3 out of 5, even when he hates it, as it's more than generous. Yes, well, that is me, isn't it, really?
Yes. This was disgustingly awful, terrible nonsense. 3 stars. 3 exclamation marks.
I'm too nice.
You are very nice.
I have a conscience about bad reviews for some reason.
You're possibly the nicest person I know, Benji.
Oh, that's never a good thing, is it? Because
it is, mate. That's why we're friends. I like nice people. I'm not so keen on not nice people. Funny that.
It's funny that is.
People say, "Oh, he's a bit of a rough guy, but he's a bit edgy." I think, well, I'm not actually interested in being his friend there because he's just going to be a pain in the neck.
He's just going to go and be edgy somewhere else.
I don't like people who are hard work.
Well, I don't like people where you don't know where you stand with them. Those types of people.
They could just go off at any moment. Yeah.
It's none of that, mate. None of that. I'd much rather know where I stand, even if I'm only standing on one leg or something like that. Much love to you both. Keep up the good work, and remember, folks, the Benji and Nick show. There's no substitute. Rick, so true.
I love the fact that he gives us an advertising slogan.
He's an absolute champion. That's what he is.
Jamie Anderson said he was available. There was a misunderstanding because he's in Cannes. They're an hour different to us in Europe, because we have our arcane changing of the time nonsense. He said he was available now, though, from 11:45, and it is, in fact, 11:43. So shall I see if 2 minutes early will flummox him?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's really ruin his day.
I'm going to ask him about Richard the Sheep. Yeah. I'm 2 minutes early.
This is a terrible time.
Is it?
Well, it's not great. I was actually in a meeting, but I've already heard the thing they're talking about, so I've just...
Okay. Have you got time to tell us about Richard the Sheep?
Richard the Sheep? Why are you asking about Richard the Sheep?
Because Richard James asked us to in an email to the podcast.
Okay. Richard the Sheep is the first lamb we had born earlier this year. He's broken both of his horns off at separate times, so he's got odd horns. He's quite tame. He comes in the house, and he likes cuddles.
Oh.
And sheep nuts.
What?
That's food. That's their feed.
Oh, right. I used to have a rabbit called Cuddles. Anyway, you need to get back to the meeting, don't you, really, mate?
Probably should, yes.
Okay, well, bless you for answering.
Not at all, thanks for having me.
Go back into the brilliant world of TV sales and production. It's very important.
Au revoir from La Belle France.
Au revoir.
Bye.
Bye.
There we go.
I love that.
It's
I love
nice to answer even when it's completely inconvenient.
I just love that they're all in the meeting listening to the door, and all they can hear him is go, yes, and he loves sheep nuts. Broken off his horns. What a legend. What a legend.
You see, he was really not really willing to talk. I mean, but he answers. That's what I can't get. Anyway, I'm just going to get a glass of water.
Go for it.
Yeah, hang on there. It involves taking off 2 sets of headphones.
Here we go.
Just entertain them while I'm away.
Nick's gone to get a glass of water. What flavour will it be? Will it be like water? That's right, he's gone to the kitchen. I can see him over there. Dum 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 ba dum ba dum 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 bum bum bum. Here he's coming back right now. He's putting it on the table.
He's tapping
a glass. Putting on his headphones there, and he's not going to hear it at all. He'll just have to find that out in the extras there.
Yeah, when I'm doing the edit, I'll find out what you've been talking about. Time for the main topic. The flip side of Dominick Hyde.
Excellent stuff, Nick. What a call. You delivered the goods, sir. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Describe the plot for the listeners.
So it rolls about a man called Dominick Hyde who comes from the future, about 150 odd years in the future, isn't it? It's a long time away anyway. Who is his job is to kind of survey the past, learn about the past, and he's often floating in a funny little flying saucer above London, studying London transport. But he wants to go and find his relative Dominick Hyde, which brings him to kind of break a few rules there, land on our planet in the 1980s, and he goes out to try and find him and gets into all kinds of scrapes.
Yeah. I'll tell you something,
excellent.
Mate. I watched this when I'd just gone to drama school, and it was when I was back visiting my parents, and I watched it one evening as a play for today, it was. And they were, as I said before, it's sort of anthology series of original important dramas. This was meant to be it was a strand of serious dramas, thought-provoking, different, quite unusual for science fiction to be done in that context, and particularly at this time in 1980 when science fiction wasn't particularly a big thing on the BBC. They did of course have Doctor Who and were, I think, going into production with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy TV series round about now. And I remember seeing it, late one night at my parents'. Well, I say late, sort of like, I don't know, was it 9:25, something like that? My parents had gone to bed anyway. They'd been trailing it all week, and I thought, this looks interesting. They kept showing the shot of him in his flying saucer dome, and as he's going along, and you have that sort of weird, so he looked a bit like a Doctor Who, to me. That's the way they
very
were
much so, yeah.
And I just found it so emotionally interesting. There's something interesting in one of the they've got a review of it on the DVD from a program that I always used to watch called Did You See, presented by Ludwig Kennedy. Well, this week on the BBC, they rather fatuously, and it's all this kind of nonsense. But and they in one of the reviews, it gets criticised by one of the strange reviewers who speaks like this. One of the things that's really annoyed me. Actually, that's a really good impersonation of the guy. I can't remember his name now. I'm sure he's dead by now. He mentioned that there's nobody nasty in it. There is no villain in this. It's inhabited entirely by nice people, and yet it's a really engaging and emotionally affecting drama. And when I watched it again last night, I just wept. Wept. I'm getting quite emotional. Yeah. I think also it's interesting that Rick says it's dated. I suppose it is dated because the modern day thing is 1980, which was when it was made. But I think its attitudes are refreshingly modern. I mean,
definitely.
The woman is very much in control. The woman he meets in 1980.
She looks, I mean, when you look at her, she looks so contemporary by today's stage. She looks just, honestly, like, I was sort of quite taken aback. I thought that if you just transplanted her from that program into something on today, she would not look any different from even the stuff she was wearing for most of it. I
suppose
thought
so.
She just looked, everything about her, I thought she just looks absolutely fine.
Yes. But she's, I suppose it doesn't give too much away that when he goes back into the past, he has a relationship with a woman, and she's very, she's not sexistly portrayed. She's very much in control. She says what she wants. She knows what she wants. She's strong. She stands up for herself.
And she's also, she's got, she's a bit mixed up in her own emotions as well. She feels like a well-rounded, realistic person. And somebody, she lives life a little bit dangerously. She's frustrated with, relationships that happened in the past. She cares for him deeply, though. Is fascinated by him, like the audience are.
It's that beautiful instant attraction thing that goes on, which is always great in a drama. That you can see that happening when she first claps eyes on him. There's a moment, although it's not obvious. It's, you know what I mean. She's also annoyed by him, and but you can. It's I think one of the things that this drama does really, really well is and it's something I often think about while writing science fiction, that it portrays the future, the language of the future, and the idioms of the future in a really realistic way. They speak in the future. They speak in a very different way, and yet it doesn't come across as cod. They have a more economic way of speaking, and one of the ways that Dominick actually accidentally betrays that he has been in the past is when he talks to his great aunt.
Actually.
And he says actually. Well, he says actually at one point, and someone says actually, and then later on he says, oh no, he says of course, and it's actually, he says later. It doesn't matter really. And she says, I haven't heard that for so many years.
It's amazing. It is amazing. But other things as well,
such
like
attention to detail,
interpretation of the past in the future. Like, I love the fact that they've got sort of these weird hologrammy things playing the Beatles on old lutes, and and it's completely, it's like that sort of slightly it's ever so slightly wrongly interpreted, all of what it actually was like, which is very true even by today's standards. We look back on things and sort of create our own opinion of them, but it's all done in a way that it does feel believable, and it feels weird, and and they do this wonderful thing where you get like the cozy sort of 1980s Earth, and people are very free and sociable and having fun, and then you kind of go to the future where it's quite cold and clinical, and everything is it's not very personal. There's not that level of, everybody lives in a brilliant way. I mean, it's like when he says, I thought it was really interesting where he said they give him a pint. He gets given a pint, and he says, I mostly drink wine, of course. But bear in mind, this is 1980, where not many people drank wine. Obviously, by today's standards, wine is drank
normal.
Everybody's drinking. Well, not everybody.
Yes, it sounded abnormal back then to say that you drink wine.
Absolutely.
Especially in a pub. Well, wine in a pub was very uncommon. They would just have, one terrible bottle that had been there for years and had probably gone off.
But it was lots of little things like that. But also the message as well. Things like smoking's bad for you, the ozone layer, spraying deodorant, air freshener and things like that. And I thought, wow, this is really...
she said, I didn't know you were into ecology, in a very dismissive way, because those views were not current then. They were just burgeoning, really. Yeah.
Terrifying to think,
don't use those. They destroy your body, he says, didn't they?
Really concerned. Yeah, they destroy your body.
And of course, everyone was smoking everywhere in the 1980s. They're smoking in the pub. She smokes at home, and she sits there in her bed sit and, starts smoking.
Yeah,
and
whereas
he
now
notices the taste of cigarettes when he kisses her, and it offends her. And she goes, well, I really must give up. Because she gets herself into a situation where she thinks she's given him enough signals that she fancies him, and he doesn't react in the same way. And you can tell she's quite, put out by that, and is a little bit petulant about it until she realises they are. He says, you wish for sex? And she goes, well, yes, I do.
Do you?
Lovely moment.
Yes. Yeah, I like as well. He's kissing her, and he says, again, but with lights out.
Yes,
just gets the lights out
and then trips over everything. He said, there's so many things. And of course, that's the other thing. The future is less cluttered. It's quite nice to. I remember when I first saw. I didn't like the woman in the future. Pippa Gard plays the part, and I really liked her watching it again. I think she plays the part beautifully. But I didn't. It's funny. On my first viewing all those years ago, I didn't warm to her at all. But I kind of appreciated her characterization a lot more this time. And of course, they got Jan Churchman doing the voice of the computer. Do you notice that, Alpha Centauri?
Yes, I noticed that.
With that little voice she has.
Instantly, I thought, yep, I know exactly who that is. So it's. But the designs of that future setup, the actual set design is really good. The sounds, I love all the door sounds. Yeah,
it's very Doctor Who, actually, isn't it? It's very 1980s Doctor Who, but in a good way. It's the best of Doctor Who style design from that time. I love the corridor he walks along with the little video effect going.
Yeah, and the mirror, which does it as well. That weird face thing. Also, it's got that bloke in it, hasn't it, from Clockwork Orange. Who's in loads of things in the 70s and 80s. What's his name? He's got the most excellent face.
Dominick, he speaks in this strange way.
Yes, he does.
It's really massively famous, and I always forget his name. I'm going to look it up.
Was he in The Elephant Man as well, or was that somebody else? I think it might have actually been somebody else who played him in The Elephant Man. But
Patrick McGee.
Patrick McGee.
I get it wrong because you want to say Patrick McNee, who was Steed in the Avengers. So.
Yeah, what a face!
I've just had a bit of spam email that says "Stop cat peeing." Thank you. Yes.
Oh, that's helpful. He wasn't in The Elephant Man, by the way. That was somebody else.
I don't think he was. No. I didn't think he was. You're saying he wasn't, so there's no point me disagree. Yeah, when you were talking about the musicians playing, of course, they do a brilliant joke, don't they? There's quite a bit of humour in it, where because he's used to people bathed in red light sitting around playing musical instruments, being holograms, who they show them walking through with a bit of CSO effect. He's in a restaurant eating with the girl in the 1980s, and there's a guy in the restaurant playing, and he happens to be bathed in a red spotlight. And I remember seeing it at the time. I thought, I know what's going to happen. He's going to think that guy's a hologram. And when he rushes out of the restaurant, he just walks straight into this guy, expecting to be able to walk through him. And it's a beautiful moment. I love those lovely little out of time moments.
But the bloke's he's playing the Beatles as well there, isn't he? Which is quite funny. Exactly, yeah,
I think that's a really smart little joke. I like it. I mean, not a brilliant joke, but I just warmed my cockles. Also, I love the silly moments where there's a lot more openness in the future, and so. Well, first of all, she says, "Oh, I've got to have a bath, make a coffee," and they've not got together at this point. They're just, he's just turned up, and she said, "Oh, could you carry this stuff into my flat and all this?" So I've got to have a bath, make yourself a coffee, and seeing him making a coffee from instant coffee, it's beautifully observed performance by Peter Firth. I mean, it's amazing that he ended up being the big sort of broad boss in Spooks for years and years. The only constant character in Spooks, I think, for the entire run of that, MI5 BBC One thriller series. It even got at least one movie spin-off, didn't it? Which he was the only character from the TV series in it.
Madness.
But seeing him trying to open Nescafe and sort of having trouble with the screw top, which he does brilliantly, and then the boiling of the kettle. And then he puts a spoonful of coffee in, but it's like a serving spoonful. And he puts lukewarm water into it and then takes it into her while she's in the bath, and she is stark naked in the bath. And he just walks in and hands her the coffee. And she sort of laughs nervously. And then she's really quite cross with him. And he sits down next to her, doesn't he, to drink it. And she goes, would you mind going? And he says, oh, yeah, okay. And she said, yes, I would like you to leave, you know. And he goes, and then she finds it amusing. Then she sips the coffee to herself. And, of course, it's like, yeah. It's like 10 times the amount of instant coffee you should put in, and it's lukewarm. She just spits it out. You know?
But I think she's oddly fascinated by him, isn't she? The whole thing.
She plays that so beautifully.
I think in terms of performances, I think it's the whole of everybody in it is pretty spot on, really. I think it's just everybody's brilliant. The whole tone of it, the mystery element of it, it's got a real atmosphere. This entire drama, it's mysterious. It keeps you really intrigued as to what's going on. Now, I thought, and there's a sequel, is there?
Oh, you've got to see.
He says like as a sequel, I want to watch that. What's it called?
You know, Another Flip for Dominick.
Another Flip.
It was
for
so.
Dominick.
I don't know whether it's the only Play for Today that ever got a sequel. I mean, it was so popular they were asked to do it, and they did it 2 years later, 1982. It's not as good, I would say, but I may be wrong. I haven't watched it again. I tell you something I remember about it, which is that Peter Firth's performance is like an impersonation of the performance he did in the first one.
Oh no.
It's like he's assimilated what he did but not seen it again, and he's doing a thing as opposed to, he's just so natural and beautiful and fantastic in the first one. And I don't think he's terrible in the second one, but it just seems he's making him a bit more sort of obviously a bit simple. It's I remember it's not quite right in my little humble opinion. By the way, Dennis Lawson is in the first one, and as was noted in the Did You See review, he is the only thing that approaches an unpleasant character, really.
Definitely, yeah. I think that's about it, isn't it? I'd say that Patrick McGee is relatively unpleasant throughout most of that.
But it's all.
But it's all. It is.
I won't spoil the ending for you. Also, it's interesting about the sort of modernness and its out of timeness. You know, the cultness of it, in the about portrayal of sexuality. One of the characters in the future is having trouble.
Yep.
He can never match with a woman, and then it turns out that he's gay, and that's revealed. And it's not revealed as if it's a terrible thing, but there is a slight moment when Pippa Gard's character, he says, you know, I found my new partner, and the camera pans to him, and she's looking at him on their version of FaceTime, I suppose. And he says, hey, Ava, and it's a guy, you know, and she goes, hey, in a kind of, okay, that's fine way. But you know what I mean? And that places it in the past, because you know that kind of reaction to someone ending up being gay is an archaic reaction, isn't it? Really,
but then
you would hope to portray it, people going, oh well, that's fine. You know, it's great.
But it could be interpreted that she never
moment, isn't it?
You could interpret it though that she never thought that he would be gay himself. And thus, she could actually be, because that's, I interpreted it.
It's not a homophobic reaction, which is refreshing.
Yeah, she was a bit like, okay. As if to say, like, oh, you're right. Okay. I think it's interesting. But it wasn't an anti thing at all. It wasn't like can you imagine if this had been made like 10 years before?
But also, well, precisely, it wouldn't have been
the Stone Tapes effect all over again.
Yeah, goodness. But also, don't think that attitudes were very, for want of a better word, modern in 1980. You know, 1980, it was a very different time, as many people will tell you. And that being in this drama was a very enlightened thing at the time. And the fact that it wasn't highlighted and made a huge thing of is, you know, quite remarkable for a 1980s drama. But of course, in a progressive strand like Play for Today, one would expect, you know, I think that's a more enlightened attitude, I would say.
I think that's the word really for this play is it's quite progressive in terms of it breaks a lot of boundaries in you know in its approach and its ideas and its assumptions of the future as well, which I think it's pretty on the nose. Not on the nose, it's on the money in terms of it kind of does get it, you know. It's not, obviously we're not like that, but in terms of our attitudes to the environment and health and social, and also our, in a way we have lost a bit of a personal touch even now with technology as kind of hasn't helped to, you can imagine that if we keep going in this sort of impersonal way, that life will get a bit colder.
Yes, very possibly. You
know, they were so amazed by the contact and the way, you know, he just people are more real in the past for him. You know, like sitting by the beach.
We've lost that. Yeah. Did you watch it right until the end of the credits?
I watched it until it said the names came up, and then
well, what you missed then is that because the time changes during the credits, the camera pans round, and it ends in the 1980s, and as the camera pans round the beach and comes back again, it's in the future, and it's just quite nice. It's quite touching. And I remember I was watching that. I thought, I bet Benji will have switched off by now.
Well, the only reason I did is because I watched it this morning, and so I had to go and do the podcast. So that is why.
It's no big reveal, but it's just a lovely little touch what they do.
There you go. I've got it on. I've got it on right now, so I can sit and give you a.
You can't give the ending away, but.
And basically, what happens is.
Everyone's head explodes.
They all turn into giant snails.
Now that'd be a great story. I'll just also say while you're watching that I think it's brilliantly directed. It's done in the old multi-camera studio way with 16mm film inserts, but it's clear they had a bit of budget, they had a bit of time, they used the latest technology. It is. And it's beautifully lit. The studio stuff is beautifully lit for video studio stuff. They've really made an attempt to make it look less harsh. It's just a fantastic job all round, actually. Beautiful.
Oh, that is really good. I'm just looking at this now. That's really rather lovely, isn't it? The way they've done that.
It? Yeah. And that little thing in the background on the beach as well. Do you see the thing sticking up?
Just getting to that bit now. It's just It
just places it in that time zone. It's fun. Someone must have run round with that prop and stuck it there during the panning.
God, it's just so weird. Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it?
It's lovely. I've definitely got to watch the sequel tonight. That's for darn
I
sure.
I think I might. Well, I won't be able to watch it tonight because I'm going out. But going out for dinner. But
very nice.
But definitely this could be one for the plane. Maybe that could be one.
Yeah,
that's a good travelling thing to watch, isn't it? But no, I mean, for me, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. I loved it.
Definitely, without question.
Absolutely loved it. And
marks.
I feel a bit emotional actually about it all because I really warmed to it all. The character, I really like them all.
They're lovely.
I felt really, it was lovely.
They never wanted to make any more. They made that second one, and then they said, "Well, quit while we're ahead."
Definitely, I'm glad that they did. Really.
I think loads of people these days, the pressure to do a TV series of it would have been immense, and they wouldn't have been able to resist the gazillion pounds offered by Netflix. I will say one controversial thing is that one of the was it Alan Gibson and Jeremy? No, I can't remember who were the writers. I'm really sorry.
Alan Gibson and I've got the titles here. Remember, Better Believe It. Jeremy Paul. Right, those two chaps. I can't remember which one. I met the daughter of one of them and worked with her. And there was a concern. There was a comedy series done years later called Goodnight Sweetheart. Yep.
And they felt very strongly, and I don't think it ever got to a court case, but some proceedings were taken, if that's the right phrase. They felt very much that it nicked the central idea of the flip side of Dominick Hyde. I mean,
can
when you
see
think
that.
about it, even though it's a very different thing, it kind of is the same idea, isn't it?
It very much, it definitely is. I mean, I suppose they're two incredibly different concepts in terms of the way that they're executed. One for comedic effect, but even then, it has got the emotional elements to it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I would agree with them on that one.
I'll leave that little one hanging there. Anyway, the flip side of Dominick Hyde, I really feel I could just go on about it forever, but probably be repeating myself endlessly. Just before we give you a new competition, I just want to say, as the centenary of the ending of the First World War approaches, it's time to rejoin my mum. Just when she was talking about her mum, my nan, as I called her experiences in the Great War. And apologies for me being such a rubbish interviewer during this, but anyway, quite an interesting little story. Could you just talk a bit about your mum and her experience in the First World War then?
Okay.
From what she told you.
Women were called up when the war was declared, and they were at the age of, I don't know whether it was 13 or 14, they were called up. They had to do war work. And she had no choice in the matter. She sort of came from school, and she had to go to Marchwood, where the magazine works there, where they filled ammunition into guns to the shells, and I think they called them the Yellow Girls because Canaries. Yeah, because they were handling these chemicals, and she was taken on pickup all the way out, right out into the country and round the other side of the Southampton Water. It was, you see, at Marchwood, and I remember her telling me, you know, how it was pitch black in the morning and it was through the winter time and it was horrible, and the horse and cart took them out to the works and brought them back at night, and had no choice. They had to do it. They were called up to do it.
And what was she doing?
She was a canary.
Oh, she was doing.
She was, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Didn't you?
No. I knew she worked in the canteen.
Oh, well, that was when she was in the army, in the canteen. But as a young girl in 1914.
So she would have just been 13, 14 years old?
Yeah. Yeah, and as soon as she was 16, war still going on, she was allowed to join the army, and we have photographs of her in her army uniform, and that was when she was the NACBs, and but she experienced terrible, terrible things because troops were coming in on the ships and they were in a very bad physical state, and they used to greet the boys as they came in, you know, limbs missing and goodness knows what, giving them a big mug of tea and a wedge of bread with something on, and she did that until 1918, when the war was over. That was the end of 18, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's quite an experience for a young woman back in 1916 to 18 there.
Stay with you for the rest of your life, wouldn't it? Something like that.
Well, it certainly did with her, certainly did. And, you know, as my mum says later, that's why when she heard that the Second World War had been declared, my grandmother just broke down and cried. And nobody in the family quite knew why, but she just sort of had a flashback, really, I imagine, to all the terrible suffering she'd seen. Anyway, as in a BBC breakfast style way, let's just go. So, the new competition. Would you like to tell us about it, Benji?
I most certainly can do. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so the prize for this one is Torchwood Children of Earth.
Yeah, which I was in.
which you were in. Is this a box set then? Is this the
yes.
You know, the DVD? Yeah?
Yes, it's the whole series. Oh yes, it's worth saying that. Yeah, it's the DVD. Yeah, it's not just a piece of paper with it written on.
It's the concept. We're selling you a concept. The question for this one then: who plays Home Office Permanent Secretary John Frobisher? Subject line: not a penguin. See what you did there. Closing date: Friday the 2nd of November. Which is it the day before Big Finish Day, isn't it?
It is.
Where we will be together, giving podcast banter to the nation. Yes. So send your answers to podcast@nicholasbriggs.com, and you could be in for a chance to win Torchwood Children of Earth, which I assume you'll sign for them, Nick, seeing as you was in it after all.
Yeah. I was in it being a very nasty government chap.
Certainly were.
Well, what a stupendous podcast this has been, he said immodestly.
Absolutely.
Let's decide next week's topic. Okay, well, how about this one? Sky.
Yeah, absolutely. Sky is an absolutely perfect one to choose, I think. Relevance, especially to...
If you can watch more than the first episode, that'd be good, but let's definitely do the first episode.
I'm up for it. So I'm certainly up for that.
You might get hooked. Yeah,
I get hooked to a lot of things, but I've got some flight time, so I can enjoy it. I can enjoy that one, because even though the flight is like, I think it's like 2.5, nearly 3 hours, but it shouldn't take that long. But obviously they've decided to dial in a nice low fuel to save themselves some money. So I'm cruising there, quite frankly. But yeah, looking forward to that one. But yeah, so Sky sounds good. Sounds good.
Very supernatural, weird sci-fi thing. Okay, well, it's time to come into the microphone.
It most certainly is.
So, well,
it's been a journey from the future to the past, and now we must journey from the present to the near future.
Oh yeah.
In fact, we already have done. That's just time.
Thank you. It's like talking to Stephen Hawking. Anyway, thank you. Goodbye. Pressing stop now. Ka-chunk on the flip side. The Dominick double return.